So far, we've had two kinds of factoring. We've had greatest common factor. That's the first thing you always look for whenever you're factoring. The second one was standard form, the basic kind when there's a 1 in front of the x squared. It was three terms. It started with a square, and then we had just a variable in the middle, no square, and a number at the end. Standard form, three terms. GCF, the first thing you always look for. Today, we're getting a third kind of factoring called a difference of squares. First, you need to be able to recognize it. It has two terms, two. It has subtraction, difference. The word difference means subtract. Has subtraction always. And then it has squares. Notice how 16 is 4 squared, and of course x squared is a square. And 25 is 5 squared, and x squared is a square. And we have that subtraction in the middle. You have to have two terms, subtraction and squares. This pattern does not work with addition. It must be a difference of squares. It turns out that difference of squares is really a special case of standard form. X squared minus 16, you can temporarily think of it as x squared plus 0x minus 16. Think of it like standard form and think of two things that would FOIL to this. I know that x times x makes x squared. I know that this number times this number makes negative 16. It's a positive times a negative to make a negative 16. And I need factors of 16. Remember that when this sign is minus, your signs are plus and minus. And when you add a positive negative number in your head, you can think subtraction. Factors of 16 that subtract is 0. They are 4 and 4. Again, it's a difference of squares. Since 16 is 4 squared, it's 4 times 4 makes 16. When you FOIL, the thing to notice is that x times x is x squared, x times negative 4 is negative 4x, and positive 4 times x is positive 4x, and positive 4 times negative 4 is negative 16. Notice that the middle makes 0, and that's why I end up with x squared minus 16. This only works because the signs are positive and negative. In the middle, I get positive 4x and negative 4x, which makes 0. Take a look at this second example. We can think of it temporarily like standard form, like the previous question. There is no middle. That's why there's a 0x minus 25. I know that when I factor this, it's x times x makes x squared. And this number times this number makes negative 25. That's a positive and a negative. And I need factors of 25. One will be positive, one will be negative. So they have to subtract to 0. Well, 5 and 5 subtract to 0. And again, it's a square. That's 5 squared. That's the clue that it's 5 and 5. When you FOIL, F-O-I-L, the outer and the inner make the middle term. In other words, positive 5x in the middle and negative 5x on the outside, when added together to make the middle term, makes 0, which is why you see x squared minus 25 as the question. It doesn't take very many of these for you to recognize the pattern. Think of the middle as 0. A times a is a squared. This number times this number makes negative 100. It's a positive and a negative. The middle is 0. There's a 0a in here. Factors of 100 that subtract to 0 are 10 and 10. It's got to be a square for this to work. That's why those numbers are the same. B squared minus 16. Well, it's b times b to make b squared. It's negative 16. It's a positive and a negative. And it's 4 times 4 to make 16. It's got to be a square to be a difference of squares. We can apply that to these down here. These have to be squares, and you have to have subtraction. As long as it's squares everywhere and you have subtraction, this works. I know that 7 times 7 makes 49. X times x makes x squared. I know that it's negative 16. It's a positive times a negative, and 4 times negative 4 makes negative 16. And it's y times y to make y squared. And again, when you FOIL, outer and inner make the middle term. On the inside, 4 times 7, you get 28xy. On the outside, 7 times negative 4 is negative 28xy. And when you combine these two together, you get 0. This last one, it's going to be 2a and 2a to make 4a squared, positive and a negative to make negative 25, and b times b. You need to be able to recognize difference of squares. It's two terms, subtraction, and they got to be squares. The rest of this video is questions from your assignment, and we start off with some review. Here's a FOIL question again. When you FOIL, think of it like the distributive property. 4x times 4x is 16x squared. 4x times negative 2 is negative 8x. Watch the signs. Positive 3 times 4x is positive 12x. And positive 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. Simplify the middle. You get 16x squared plus 4x minus 6. Notice that this is a standard form. And if you factor it, it would make that. Here we have some more GCF. Find the greatest common factor of 4x squared and 16x. Both are divisible by 4 and both have an x. 4x times the first spot makes 4x squared. We need one more x to make x squared. Plus 4x times something makes 16x. That would be a 4. Both are negative here, so we're going to include the negative as part of the GCF. 15 and 5 are divisible by 5, and they both have an x. You pull out a negative, both signs inside are going to be positive. Negative 5x times the first spot makes negative 5x squared. That would be another x. And negative 5x times the second spot makes negative 15x. That would be a positive 3, because negative 5 times positive 3 is negative 15. And we have that x there. For the third one here, both have an x in them, x times x minus 8. And for the last one, both are divisible by 4, and both have an x. 4x times the first spot makes 4x squared. Well, that would be an x. 4x times the second spot makes negative 12x, and that would be negative 3. Question 3 again is review. It is standard form. How do I know it's standard form? Because it's 3 terms. It has a square, a middle with just the variable, and a number at the end. Recognize it as standard form. We need 2 sets of parentheses to factor it. Y times y is y squared. This number times this number makes the negative 68. It's got to be a positive and a negative. I need factors of 68 because they're positive and negative. They will subtract to 13. I brought up my factor table, and looking down the list, I'm looking for 2 factors that subtract to 13. And there they are, 4 and 17 subtract to 13. So my numbers are 4 and 17. I've got to put them in the right spot, though. Remember that when you FOIL, you add 2 things to make the middle term. And the coefficients will be 4 and 17. So I've got to make 4 plus 17. One's positive, one's negative. I got to make that negative 13, the middle term. Looks like it's negative 17 and positive 4. Positive 4, negative 17. Question 4. Another standard form review. X times x is x squared. This number times this number makes positive 56. The signs are either 2 negatives or 2 positives. The middle is a minus. It's got to be the 2 negatives then. Factors of 56. and they're both going to be negative. They're going to add to negative 30. Factors of 56 that add to 30. Looks like I think it's 2 and 28. 2 times 28 is 56. Doesn't matter where you put them. It's the same answer either way. Use the factor table if you have trouble finding factors of 56. Question 5, another review question. Standard form. X times x is x squared. This number times this number is positive 44. It's either two positives or two negatives. The middle's a plus. Got to be the two positives then. Factors of 44 that add to 15 are 4 and 11. And since the signs are the same, you can take your pick. Either order is correct. Question 7. This is a difference of squares. We recognize it because it has two terms. Both are squares. 49 is 7 squared. And a squared is a square. And we have subtraction. Difference means subtraction. Difference of squares. We're looking for two things that FOIL to this. I told you before, you can think of it as having a middle of 0. 0a is 0. And you need factors of 49 that subtract to 0. Well, that times that makes negative 49. It's a positive and a negative. And the factors that subtract to 0 are 7 and 7. Yeah, it's 7 squared. Doesn't matter where you put the 7s because they're the same number. And you can go either order. A minus 7 times a plus 7 or a plus 7 times a minus 7. It's the same thing. X squared minus 64. X times x is x squared. 8 times 8 is 64. It's negative 64. It's positive and negative. Notice that if you FOIL the inside and the outside together to make the middle, the inside is positive 8x, the outside is negative 8x, and when you add those two things to make the middle term, they make 0. More difference of squares. 8 times 8 is 64. X times x is x squared. 5 times 5 is 25. It's negative 25. It's got to be a positive 5 times a negative 5. If you FOIL this, the inside is positive 40x, and the outside is negative 40x, and together that makes 0. That's why there's no middle term. 9x squared minus 36, the last example. 3x times 3x is 9x squared. 6 times 6 is 36. It's negative 36. It's positive and negative. Note that the middle, if you FOIL, would be positive 18x. The outside, if you FOIL, would be negative 18x. And that would make the middle 0. There's our answer.